Welcome to Season 1 of the PMO Community Podcast series. I'm Aina Live, and I'm excited to guide you through another insightful conversation in our series, which is a part of our unique book writing challenge, focused on PMO leadership and value-driven project management. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Mercy Mosunmola Momah, a highly experienced and certified project management and business analyst professional with over 19 years of proven expertise across industries. Mercy excels in program delivery, product management, consulting, and governance, and she's renowned for bringing concepts to life while challenging the status quo. In this episode, Mercy and I will explore addressing skill gaps within PMOs and strategies for impactful learning and development plans. We will turn into how PMOs can balance compliance with being truly value-driven in agile environments. Then we will talk about enhancing stakeholders' engagement through improvement communication to drive successful outcomes. Then we will talk about managing scope creep and aligning project with strategic objectives, and key strategies for improving performance management within PMOs for accountability and continuous improvement. Stay tuned as Mercy shares her valuable insights into PMO evolution and the challenges and opportunities for project managers in today's dynamic business environments. Hi, Mercy. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Aina, for having me today.
I'm excited to start this conversation because as a part of our book writing challenge on the topic of evolution of PMO raise of the Chief Project Officer role, you are probably the only one author who highlighted the skills gaps in PMOs. So let's start with this question. Mercy, could you share a success story where you've implemented a learning and development plan that made a significant difference in bridging the skills gap in PMOs?
Thank you very much for that question. And it's so interesting to know that I was the only one who dived into that aspect in terms of skill gap. So, interestingly, I've been so privileged to work in various industries, over 10 industry and still counting today. And I've also been privileged to start up a PMO or a program delivery office or a value delivery office in various organizations today. So I've had enough experience in terms of having to start up a PMO, and I've been privileged to understand some of the challenges, and one of it is skill gap. I would like to share an example with you. In one of the industries that I worked, there was no PMO office. So we started off the PMO office. I was the only one in that office. And the first challenge I faced was I was just the only one in that department. So I requested for other team members to be employed, but because there was no budget for that, and the organization did not fully understand what the PMO office will be adding to the organization. So instead of trying to convince them to hire more people when they've not even seen value, we decided to get resources from various departments who were marketers, sales officers, graduate trainees, and all of these people started off the PMO with me. So I experienced a case where, in that instance, there was just me as a certified project management professional, and I had just 5, 10 people without any project management experience, business analyst experience. So I had to put together a training plan rather than getting them to go get certified. We already had a number of projects running. I was the only certified professional, and I can't run all the projects alone. What I did was to immediately carry out an assessment for each one of them because they all had experience in various fields, right? So for those who have been into marketing, I know they have developed a skill to analyze things. So I started grooming them into business analysis. And for others that had skill sets in in terms of organization, managing people, maybe the current job they were doing is related to managing people. I started grooming those set of people for project management. And then after carrying out that assessment, we went further to now come up a tailored based training plan. So first of all, the coaching, I started off with coaching and mentoring. So I was the only experienced one. So every project I was on each of those projects, and each of the project managers and BA accompanying me to the field to understand how I do the job. In less than 6 months, they understood what they needed to do. And then I took it further. Every Friday and weekend, we started covering key areas. Rather than cover the entire 10 knowledge areas in project management, I focused on 4 major areas, which is a major pain point in project management. And the first one is stakeholder management, risk management, scope management, and of course, leadership. So we came up with a project plan a training plan rather, and we started addressing each of these areas. I can tell you in less than 1 year, you could hardly tell that they were not certified project managers. And that brings me to say that sometimes a lot of emphasis are there to get certified. But I've also over the years worked with professionals who are certified project managers, and they did not still have some soft skill to work in that role. So in summary, I was able to groom these people and they started performing and managing projects. And in another 2 years, they all got certified. So that's how I was able to achieve that using a learning development plan to upgrade the skills. Thank you.
Thank you. I like the energy you were talking about, the experience. I even feel inspired right now and kind of like living that experience with you. Like
Yeah.
first, I really like that you started with, I didn't want to convince. Instead, I started doing 1, 2, 3, so action plan right away. And then you
Yeah.
started grooving. And then when you use the word like immediately, I created a training successful plan. And then I started grooming and all of this. And a year later, you couldn't recognize people. And also the part that you mentioned, soft skills, because soft skills is the essential skill for a project manager. But unfortunately,
Absolutely.
I haven't seen many project managers having these soft skills. So I am really inspired by the answer. And also, I feel like you use lots of influence during the process because, again, quoting you, you didn't want to convince. So you started doing it and people had to trust, but you also needed to engage the stakeholders and bring this influence to make people trust. So I will dig
Yeah.
deeper a little in this question. So,
Okay.
Mercy, in cases where the PMO has limited authority, what tangible actions can be taken to increase influence and improve project delivery outcomes?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Where there are limited resources, the question is, can you rephrase the question again? I just want to answer it differently. Yeah.
For sure. So if PMO has limited authority, so the stakeholders not really trust a PMO yet, maybe because they didn't have enough experience yet with PMO. So what actions can be taken to increase the influence from PMO to improve project delivery?
Thank you very much for that question. Just riding on my last conversation regarding building resources. Now, a lot of times you find out most organizations are still, some are matured in project management, but
Mhm.
when you find yourself in an environment where project management is not fully appreciated and recognized in that organization, the first thing you need to do is to show value. And the moment you start showing value, people will see it. And what do I mean? What do I mean by showing value? The first thing you have to do is to identify the gaps in the organization. There are various departments, cross-functional teams that are carrying out projects because projects are everywhere. There is no organization today that doesn't have a project running. They might not call it a project management office, but if you go into each of the departments, you will find them struggling and working on a project being run operation in a very casual manner. So what I normally advise project professionals to do is to engage, network with the supply chain, network with all the various departments, the accounting department, the logistic department, and all the departments, and find out what their pain points are. The moment you focus on their pain point and start adding value, right, to whatever it is they are doing in that department, they will begin to recognize and associate you, who is in the PMO, to say, yes, we need a PMO in our space. Now, most times when a PMO is set up, I also find out that there's a lot of focus on compliance. I always encourage professionals not to start with compliance. Start by supporting, especially when the maturity level is very low. When you start by supporting each of the departments or various entities you have in that organization, you begin to gradually show value. So when that project they are working on, maybe they've been delivering it for maybe they spend 2 years delivering it, and you come in and do that same project in less than the record time they've ever done it, they will begin to ask you to come and help them to structure things. And that is when you can now dive into standardization. But most times when you go from standardization, there will be resistance, there will be pushback. So to show value is to come from a place of, you have a problem, let me help you solve this business need. And then when you solve it, you move around and you start solving that problem across. They begin to see value. And when they see value, you have a case. And by the time you ask them to set up a proper PMO office, nobody's going to contest that. Thank you.
I totally agree. And I would like to share my experience a little bit here. Absolutely. We need to solve the problem to get people trust us. But
Yeah.
I believe if you are new to the organization or start transformation or start doing something new, try to solve small problem first. Don't take the huge challenge, because it will take lots of time for you to solve it, and people are impatient and people are spending money and they don't know what they spend money for. So to solve the big problem right away will give you more challenges than if you solve something small. But when you solve something small and your leader sees a success, oh, okay, that problem is solved. So you gain your trust, and then you can start something bigger. And what I noticed talking to my mentees, they start to do something huge, or let's start the revolution. No, gain your trust first, gain your influence, and then go to something big. Mercy, would you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely right. That's why you start small. You don't start running after the big stuff. You start small and show value incrementally. And that way you win the trust of the customer, you win the trust of the business, and you become a strategic partner.
So let's switch the gears and talk about scope creep. So, Mercy, how can PMOs best manage scope creep and keep projects aligned with their strategic objectives? And do you use any specific tools or methods, or can you recommend some?
Thank you very much. And this reminds me of all the various projects I've handled. Scope creep is one of the biggest challenge in managing projects. And one of the root cause of scope creep, which I've found out over the years, is that when you start off a project and you don't fully identify your stakeholder from the onset, that usually leads to scope creep. What do I mean? You start off a project, a group of people, let's say you are building a solution for the marketing team, right? And then the project comes from the top, from the management. And most likely, maybe somebody else, maybe the strategy department came up with that strategic initiative. If you start that project without carrying the sales and marketing team along from the very onset, you will build a solution that is not fit for purpose. And that is why the first root cause for scope creep is lack of identification of stakeholder. The second thing I've also found out over the years is communication management. You're building a solution, right? And people don't fully understand what this solution will address. People, of course, you face resistance, right, from people. And then you have also added the problem of not having the right stakeholders in in the project meetings. So at some point during execution, even close to the finish line, the users are now invited to come and assess the system. And that is where you start finding out that a lot of requirements were not captured. So one of the major issue is the communication, and of course, the lack of identification of stakeholder and engagement with the stakeholder. Sometimes you are engaging with the stakeholder, but you are not engaging with the right stakeholder. Another issue that also I found out that causes scope creep is you are engaging the right stakeholder, right? But the market is evolving. And as the market is evolving, whatever it is you have gotten as a requirement from the onset has changed. And that is why the waterfall methodology has gradually, that we have proven over the years that for software developmental project, agile is the best approach, or an hybrid. So that, because scope creep over the years, I've seen that is inevitable. There will always be changes, but when you break down the project work into a minimum viable product and release the product, version it and release them over a period of time, it enables you to lock down the requirement for a short period of time. But when you're doing waterfall methodology and you're running a project for 2 years, your requirement gathering probably happened in the 4th month of the project, right? And then your testing is happening in the 16th month of the project. So what happens between that 12-month window plus? What happens is that technology, things have changed, needs have changed, and then you find the customer trying to make changes to the requirement. And if you go by the change management process, you say this is a change request, you have to do it in the second phase of the project. You find out that that solution will go live and it will never be used, or the adoption will be poor. So one of the tools I use is to break down my work into very short sprints using an agile methodology, and ensure that as we finish, there's also a retrospective and continuous sprint planning to ensure that the requirements are reviewed at every point in time in the project, and then we prioritize what is most important. So basically, your scope is not locked in 100%, and that way you can ensure you can reduce scope creep. One last thing that can also reduce scope creep is you need to have, if it's a waterfall project you're dealing with, you need to have a detailed scope statement. A lot of assumptions are being made by users, and I found that that's one of the real problems. People assume the system will be able to do something, but they never said it out. They never articulated it. It was never written down. And then the vendor or the project team is complaining that it's a scope creep. But on the other hand, the customer is saying, that's a given. I didn't have to tell you that you should add an audit tray into the system, or you should have some certain functionality into the system. So what I have learned to do is there are certain standards that a solution should have, whether the customer asks of them or not. I have it as part of a must-have that a system should have, so that by the time you get into the requirement gathering, I will just review those general standard requirements with the customer to say, in addition to what you've given, I assume you also require this. Can you validate it? And then we lock down the scope. That way, I've been able to manage scope creep a lot better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercy. And just to reiterate, there are religious wars between waterfall and agile, but I honestly believe, as an agilist, like there is no right or wrong of using one of these methodologies, or even like combined in the hybrid, because each project and each organization is unique. And if you see value of like doing partly one and partly another, why not to do that? So like in Mercy's example, yes, it's a waterfall, but why not to add sprints and break down the work into smaller increments? And also, why not reflect and retrospect on what is happening with the progress of your project and why the scope is creeping? And another part you mentioned, it's stakeholder engagement. So like managing scope and managing stakeholders, it's going like hand to hand, because communication is the key of the success of the project management. So
Absolutely.
and let's move on to the strategies. So what strategies do you recommend for improving performance management with PMOs to ensure accountability and continuous improvement?
Thank you very much. In terms of strategy in improving the performance of project management, I did mention that you need to have a scope in place.
Yeah.
So for every project that you are delivering to the business or to the organization, you need to measure performance. And there are certain metrics that you can focus on in measuring performance. You need to measure your time to market. You need to measure your success rate. You need to measure the time it takes to churn out deliverables. So those are some of the things that you do to ensure you are able to deliver performance. And as I said, when you develop your resources, right, and they've acquired the necessary skills, they are meant to perform. But for that performance, for you to achieve value and increase performance for that project, you need to define your criteria. Remember, you had a scope document, and then you need to understand what does success look like to the customer, and then measure those metrics as you go on the project, so that by the time you get to the finish line, that solution has met the requirement. And just to add, sometimes performance could also, another thing that has also impacted project professionals over the years is that we are being driven by the triple constraint: scope, time, and cost, right? And sometimes we lose focus on providing value to the customer. So, in as much as you are measuring your scope, you're measuring you're using your end value management calculations to determine if you are behind schedule or on schedule. We must not lose focus on delivering quality. So I would rather have a solution delayed but met the business need than have a solution that was delivered on schedule, on time, on budget, but did not meet the requirement of the customer.
And Mercy, looking ahead, how do you see PMO evolution impacting business success, and what new trends should leaders be preparing for?
Thank you very much. One of the things that I've also realized, what things will look like in the nearest future, is that AI has come into automation. There's so many solutions out there today. So for a PMO, the PMO is evolving every day, right? And over the next few years, you will find out that some of the work we do manually today would have been automated. So how do you evolve along with it? You need to start understanding the trend. Most project managers need to start acquiring skills in AI technology to understand how it works. You need to start acquiring skills in data analytics. At this point in time, you need to have certain skill sets employed in the PMO office, not just project managers, not just business analysts. We need to start bringing in the functional guys into the PMO in order to co-create value, right? And that is where things are going in the nearest future. And I also see a situation whereby most organizations would have embraced having a chief project officer. It's already there out there. A lot of people are beginning to see the value of having a chief project officers in the business, because for a PMO to be able to effectively add value, the PMO must have someone in the room speaking on their behalf. And that is why you need an executive sitting at the table to acquire resources to gain momentum in the PMO. And that is where I see the PMO in another 5 years from now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mercy, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. And also thank you all for tuning in to the PMO Community Podcast for this enlightening discussion with Mercy Mosunmola Momah. And a special thanks to our volunteers at the PMO Community Podcast for making this episode possible. Stay tuned for more captivating insights and interviews in our upcoming episodes. And don't forget to follow us on social media to stay updated. And if you find this episode valuable, please remember to like and share it. And feel free to reach out to me, Aina Alive, on LinkedIn with any questions or requests. And for all of the latest updates, make sure to follow us on social media such as LinkedIn, the PMO community page, Podbean, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Samsung Podcast. Thank you.